Welcome, everybody, for this session. I was given the opportunity by CREST to present, and I thought, what would I present that will really be part of my work? And I decided to talk about two incidents that I have worked in, maybe not too close together, but recently, that made me begin to think that I'm in my profession because probably I'm a real drama queen because of all the drama that go with some of the incidents that we worked on. So I am Zaza Handy. I work for entity, global entity DFIR team. I primarily do incident response and intrusion forensics, but as part of my job, I also do malware reverse engineering, smartphone forensics, and anything that have to do with finding the what, the who, the when, the how of incidents, mostly cybersecurity type incidents. So the agenda, the two cases I'm gonna talk about today, one of them involved the data loss, where nobody knew who was involved, who did it, and we were taken round and round in a circle by the company impacted, and we were getting different kinds of information. I'm going to talk about some of the challenges that we had and lessons that we learned from there for some of the companies that may encounter similar. And then the second one is the one that was actually full of drama, where was not recent. We got a call from a director who was complaining that somebody in Mexico had responded to an email he sent to his wife. And I will talk through some of the things we investigated. And normally whenever an incident happens, everybody thinks about malware. None of this had anything to do with malware at the end. And I also covered the lessons learned from that. So a case of whodunit, and that is this comedy I got this from. I haven't really watched the whole series, but I like the text, the name of it, whodunit, because we had an MSP managing the client's environment. We also have IT staff from the client environment, and of course we had the malware, the attacker syndrome that maybe it was attacker who had done it. Ultimately, about close to or more than 1,000 user mailboxes were deleted. And that was what triggered the incident. Now, if you look at the CIA triad of it, eventually we decided that it had to do with the availability of the data, and on our part, the integrity of the evidence that we had to analyze to be able to do our job properly. So this incident, this particular one really have to do with what we expect customers not to do when an incident happens. But it's easy for me to stand here and say it, because if I found out that I had deleted files or someone deleted my files, the last thing I would naturally think about would be forensics. No, I will start digging to see how I will find my files, and the more I dig, the more I corrupt the evidence. So it started with a user calling support to say their mailbox issues, they can't find their emails, and it had happened like a few days before the user contacted the client. And prior to us getting involved, the client have had, this was on a Linux environment, so as you can see, that those of you who are familiar with Linux, that's from the bash history. So evidence is there in the file that someone knows bash history. You can see the remove command. It's been redacted heavily redacted, because we don't judge customers, and we have NDA. It's just for learning purposes that we are presenting this. So they have gone through all of this, and that's the initial investigation, and they also sent us this information from the bash history. And also they have looked at some of the logs, like the last log, who was recent login for all users, and the secure log that documents authentication and authorization to see who done it, who was logged in at the time. And then this happened like 2 weeks before we were informed, and as soon as we were informed, we did notify the customer to, get forensic evidence preserved so that eventually we'll be able to have something to work on. These were some of the things we advised. So create a snapshot of the system. It was a virtual machine environment, and also if they struggle with that, we gave different options or multiple options, capture the memory of the image. Again, if I deleted files, the last thing I will be thinking about would be, oh, let me grab my memory. No, I will be digging to see how can I recover my file. So the actual actions taken by the users, the IT people, and the MSP staff who were genuinely trying to resolve a problem. They started troubleshooting on the system. There was no backup done immediately. They issued general all kinds of commands, because on the next slide, we'll understand why they were digging, because of what I will explain later. So they were kind of giving all these commands, grepping this and that, checking that, and then eventually they created the snapshot of the system after they have done all of that. And as they were issuing the command, they were overwriting the history, because the history buffer was not as much to sustain, to carry the volume of querying they were doing. So on the badness scale, we identified that the particular command that really made our work difficult was a command they issued to generate timestamps so that whenever anybody logs in, they will get that timestamp. And the issues now, so we have data that have been deleted, so regulators have already been notified, and there was insufficient logging in the environment. They had some logs, but they didn't have a log that can prove non-repudiation, like this person did this at a particular time. And I will explain why later. So the issue of privilege access management, it was not available because everybody, all the administrators, they were given root access. Some were root on their own. They had UID 0, if you understand what that means. But all of them had root access. So in this situation, I would have preferred if each person was made root on their own, so that when they log in with their account as root, any action they took would be attributed to them. But the way the bash history works, when somebody logs out, you erase the history, and then another person logs in. So that's why in the previous slide, where you have all those commands, remove this, remove that, nobody could tell who specifically gave each command. There was a lot that was happening in the background, but we don't have a lot of time to talk about everything that limited the investigation. So, and destruction of evidence, as I mentioned before, because they were issuing commands, and insufficient knowledge of the application that hosted that mailbox. Also, on our part, we had our own delays because we didn't think the application logs initially. So, because oftentimes you're looking at the operating system, the full system forensic and all that, but then nobody had enough knowledge of the bespoke application that they were using. Of course, change management behavior. People would just log in, give commands, log out. So the main thing that really damaged the evidence in memory, because with the bash history, on disk, if you didn't initially set it up to timestamp, it will not give you the timestamp, it will just give you the list of commands that you entered. But in memory, if you do memory forensic, I think Linux bash history command, it will give you the timestamp. So we heavily relied on that. When we managed to get hold of that snapshot, and it covered a bit of the time, we could see that the remove commands were there, But somebody had given that command there in red, and what that command does is that as soon as you give that command, every other action that happened prior to giving that command would take the current date, and that was it. So subsequent ones were time-stamped. And that was how we couldn't find, attribute it again to who done it. And if you see some of during that troubleshooting, whoever, because we know somebody did this, it wasn't a script because it was in the bash history. Somebody also was trying to remove the snapshots. The history command probably linked to that. And then somebody was trying to overwrite the secure file. So in the integrity of some of the evidence we had could not be relied on for such a case. So that's the command as we saw it in memory. Even though it was in memory, all the subsequent ones, they were accurately time-stamped. But if you look, everything in red there, they all had the same timestamps. And obviously, that was not enough for us. It didn't tally with other evidences to say this was who done it. So we carried out log analysis of all the logs that were available. We extracted the disk image, did file system forensic, also did the memory forensics as I talked about. However, it wasn't until, sorry, go back a bit. It wasn't until like 5 days into that we were told, oh, by the way, the storage is in an external device. It's not on the system where we're doing the file system forensics. So it was really, it wasn't that useful. We could do the file system forensic to find out what other actions, what file system actions were being done at the time, like any other file that was being deleted, who was logged in. People who said they were logged in at one particular time, were they really logged in at that time? And what they said they were doing that we were able to achieve that. But determining what file was removed and who was removed, we couldn't get that from there, from the file system forensics. Because when they log in, they become root. All the bash history for root was for all of them. We couldn't separate any of this. So towards after we did the first report, because we're seeing evidence of deletion in some logs were saying unable to delete, data during a particular activity that didn't have anything to do with our investigation, but it tallied with the period. So we kind of tried to align that with who was logged in at the time. Multiple people logged in, and they were all coming in via jump box, the same jump box. So it became really like a daymare trying to figure out who done this. And we had done our preliminary investigation, as I said, ruled out malware. There was no evidence of external intrusion. It was somebody who was looking at it. Later, it was kind of validated that they were trying to recover disk space, different parties. And during that process, somebody may have thought, oh, maybe these files are not relevant anymore, and then yank off. So it couldn't be confirmed because non-repudiation. If this case went to court, you say this person did it, you don't have enough evidence to say that beyond reasonable doubt that person did it. Why? Because the evidence have already been tampered. Most of the commands that were given at the time were no longer in memory. So towards the end, we now found these application logs with all these RM commands. This gave us a little bit of closure, but it still did not give complete closure. What we learned from this case is everything I have mentioned so far, but particularly this, in terms of evidence corruption, the forensic readiness, it's always important to capture volatile memory as soon as possible, even for delete command, even for loss of data. Oftentimes people think it's just to do with malware or hacking, but this would have, as you have seen, if they hadn't given all those commands prior to us getting hold of the snapshot or the memory file, we would have been able to see the timestamps and also married it to who was logged in at the time. And the privilege access management, there are several tools out there that they use to do privilege access management that would help with non-repudiation. So when somebody gives a command, when somebody logs in, you know exactly who done it. It's not a group of people like talking about 16 or to 20 people, not knowing, because they were all logging in actively all the time. And file integrity monitoring tool would have been able to save the day. It didn't help that the system where the storage system, the actual storage, the system that managed that storage did not have any logs available. And obviously, there were no backups. So what we learned from this is several things, as I've said earlier on, that forensic readiness, file integrity monitoring, any tool, all the tools like end-to-end monitoring to be able to detect when something happens, like a delete. The actual delete was like RM commands looking about 40 of them, and some of them were like directories, so whoever was giving it would use the recursive command to every other thing underneath that would go. So loads of mailboxes were lost in the process. So, but if there was a tool for monitoring this type of thing and capturing the right type of traffic, it would have been detected the first time it happened. So that's a duplicate. And that's our first case. The next one, I took this picture, or kind of I stole this picture more like, of Google Images, something in Rome. Traffic jam where everybody was headed in every direction, even though there's supposed to be a traffic light somewhere. So there's a lot of chaos there. That's what happened with this case. As I said earlier on, somebody who was concerned called up to report that somebody in Mexico had replied to an email he sent to his dear wife. And you know, the emails that husbands send to wives is nothing like, are you attending the meeting, or are you, it's very intimate, personal meeting email. So again, the first thing, malware. Is it malware? Is it a malicious forwarder? Was it a security control? It turned out that it was a security control that went crazy, as in crazy. So for this one, the CIA triad that we identified, confidentiality, availability, and integrity. Somebody's email was read by another person. We'll get to the availability part of it, and then the integrity part of it, because it really went crazy. So when I received this notification, I was just about to put my backpack and head to the train station that day, working as a consultant on a site, and I got that call. So I checked, and I checked, no malware, no evidence of forwarding. Even we contacted, checked, retrieved data from the wife's machine. And it turned out, as you can see, somebody sent email to the wife, or I sent email to somebody I know. That email was sent to another person. There was no forwarding, no CC, no BCC anywhere. And then I escalated, because I'm not a very clever SME when it comes to mail architecture. So I escalated to the SMEs. Is a very big environment, people who were in charge of the mail service, to find out what was going on, and they put out logs, tracking logs and stuff, and were looking. It turned out that this was already happening a couple of weeks before this time. It only became obvious because whoever received that email now decided to reply. So this problem would take an attachment from me that I'm sending to you and send the attachment to another person. Yeah? Think of that chaos on that traffic jam. And then, where there was no BCC, where there was no BCC, I don't think it was captured on this slide. Where there was no BCC, oh yeah, that's it. Where there was no copy, like no blind copy, no copy to any other person, the email will be sent, copied to other people. How that happened on that day, I said I was paying for my sins, because I've never seen anything like that before. And high-profile email addresses were involved. So they asked me, what do we do? This was me. I was saying, don't ask me, just disconnect, remove. What was it? It happened that they introduced a new technology to secure the email. So they introduced this technology to secure the email, and that was the technology that did that. We traced it to that where the log started mangling. It's not like from the logs you could see. On this other control, you will see that email was sent to that person. It has a tracking number. On the next control, that particular email have gone to another person, and it's been going on for a while. So I told them to, no negotiation, just disconnect it and remove it. I was screaming like a rabid dog that evening, or that night. So that was the initial action that we took. Root cause and lessons learned from this. People don't send email to their wives so that somebody in Mexico will read and reply. It was good the guy in Mexico replied because he wasn't, you know, some communities are not very calm, very courteous, very, you know, I want to mind my business. Oh, he sent the email, say, why you send me your wife picture? You know, so, yeah, that was how it all started. So, the control that introduced this catastrophe because of the impact was really high. There was no proper risk management when it was introduced. And you know, sometimes we get these shiny tools and we love them because of what the vendor have advertised that it can do. But you have to risk manage everything from identifying possible risk that can come from it to actually knowing how to respond to any risk that one may identify from that. And then the second one was when I was asking questions, trying to find my root cause, I also identified that they did not do any pre-production testing for that control. So it's a very good security control. What it can do is really very clever, you know. It can deal with people who click on everything thinking they are looking for their grandfather's will. So it will stop them doing that. But what they didn't test was how it will handle load. You know, have you seen me with a load on my head? I'm an African. So when it gets too much for me, I put it on my head. Yeah, so they didn't test how this will handle excessive load or stress. So when the traffic hit this control, it's all to do with algorithms, code. At the end of the day, we are dealing with software and hardware. So when he encountered a stressful situation, he went crazy. So they didn't test it properly. They knew that it worked. They tested it with a few email addresses, a few connections. You don't test this type of thing like that. They should have tested how it will work on that. There are several, that's not my specialty, but there are several tools that they used to do, at least Selenium or something like that, they used to do testing or engage a third-party company to do testing for them. So this was the main issue, because if they had done this and identified how the system would behave under a race situation, they would have hung fire or hang on, we can't deploy it everywhere. Let's just deploy it this little place, risk manage it. This is where we have our launchers. I call them those, oh, I have an email. Click, 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 I have a link. I click. So identify the area where you need to put that and put it there. But that wasn't identified and that wasn't done. And we didn't rule out a bottleneck like you would have on the M25 around maybe 5 p.m. tonight. I don't know whether they have sorted the M25. Now, many years ago, the M25 is like a bottleneck. So if all the traffic coming from all the other controls, they were all passing through this one control that does these magical things, it got overloaded, and then it started throwing have you ever seen an attachment go to another email? That happened. So, project management gaps. During that time, I was asking, so who is the owner of this project? Who is the project manager? So that they can kind of educate me on what, because if you don't know the root cause of something, you'll never be able to solve that problem. It will keep happening. And we found project management gaps, change management gaps, like Wild, Wild West deployment, you know, when they were hunting for gold. Oh, we found this technology that really works very well. It does this, it does that. Oh, and that director says, oh, let's have it, you know, and they had it. So these were the root cause, but most importantly, again, vendor and third-party management gaps, quality assurance. When you are deploying controls that you have never used before, I think it makes sense to at least get a certificate from the vendor if you're not going to test with another third party. Get a certificate from them to find out what quality what quality assurance they have for the product. You find oftentimes people are looking at, oh, this is cheaper, you know, this is cheaper, this can do this, this was deployed by this company and deployed by that company. Oh, where I used to work before, they use that. Where you used to work before may just have a 500 IT system and 200 people working there. Where this happens, you're looking like about, I don't know how to count, global, you see. So is that quality assurance that was missing? And I was going to add a third one, but I wasn't sure I would finish on time. So I did only two. We have a lot of incidents such as this that we tackle all the time at NTT. Some of them easy, phishing, malware. You know, the first one about the data, I said, God, I pray to you every morning. Why don't you just give me a malware incident? I want a malware incident right now. I do not want this who done it. Everybody is not agreeing that they did something, you know. But that was what it is. We engage on all kinds of incidents. But this gets to show that it's not always malware that is the root cause. The root cause could be anything. And as an incident responder, you'll be ready to respond to whatever is thrown at you. You can see the first one didn't have anything to do with Windows. Oftentimes we get Windows-related incidents. It was purely on Linux, so hash up your skill sets in that area too. The second one, after they did what I did by shouting they should remove and disconnect, and then the palaver actually started where you went back to start scoping the incident, the actual scope, to find out when, how many. It was nasty. But they recovered from it and they notified who needed to be notified and tried to recall emails that may not have been read by the recipients. And I don't know what became of that product or the vendor, whether they took them to court or whether they... I won't be surprised if they still went back to use the solution, because at the end of the day, a lot went into that development of that program or that solution, but it wasn't tested. I have failed a lot of times in my life, in my personal life and in my career life, and I found out that the failures are the things that bring me up to the next level. So it may have helped that company to restructure their tool, and in their next phase two, they would think about that load and stress testing. Thank you for having me.